GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, hello there. It's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. on your screens and in your radio right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Now, Paris is on fire. Much of France. What do you make to this? Have you seen it all going on? It's all stems from the fact that Macron changed the pension age without a vote. And there's lots of talk that over here in this country, the pension age should indeed be increased. Should it? To what? When? Your thoughts? And of course our king, he's cancelled his visit to France. Was that the right decision for safety? Or is it giving a message to those protesters that actually setting your city on fire wins? Tricky. Your thoughts on that and this whole kind of debacle about releasing tax returns, which I don't agree with. But what do you make to it all? It's created a debate, hasn't it, about whether or not wealth should be taxed the same as wages. Should it? Your thoughts? And Ofsted inspections, are they inhumane? That's what it's been called recently because of the tragic suicide of a head teacher who had one of the lowest ratings you could get. Is it time to scrap the school inspections? And did you see the ridiculousness today? The group of lawyers that have signed a declaration of conscience. You what? It basically means that they've now decided they will refuse to prosecute climate activists. Give me a break. When should political views ever be able to hinder, help, anything, impact the professional activities of lawyers? What would that mean to our legal system? It's all wrong if you ask me. And I've got a barrister on tonight as well, none other than Alex Dean, so I'll be interested in his thoughts as well. Of course, alongside him, Paul Embry. So we'll get into all of that and more. But before we do so, let's bring ourselves up to speed with the headlines from Tatiana Sanchez.
Michelle, thank you and good evening. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The first state visit of King Charles to France has been postponed because of protests across the country. Tens of thousands of people have been demonstrating against the government's plan to raise the pension age from 62 to 64. The King was due to arrive on Sunday as part of a week-long trip to Europe. The French President, Emmanuel Macron, has suggested the new date for that visit will be in the early summer. The Windsor Framework has now been formally adopted by both the EU and the UK. The Foreign Secretary and European Commission chaired a meeting earlier to sign off the post-Brexit trade agreement. That's after MPs voted in favour of the Stormont break, despite continued opposition from the DUP. James Cleverly told Maros Sefcovic he's grateful for his help.
This is not the corporate thanks of the British government, this is the personal thanks of me, James Cleverly, to you, Maros Sefcovic, for the commitment that you have put in, and of course the work that has been done by your wider team in getting us to what is a really good place that we are genuinely grateful.
And I want to appreciate and pay respect to each and every one of you around the table, because you've been working tirelessly and in the spirit of what is possible and what we can do. While the people and businesses in Northern Ireland will now benefit from lasting certainty and predictability, the EU and UK can, and I'm convinced will, exploit the full potential of the trade and cooperation agreement.
The Prime Minister has stressed the importance of upholding democratic values at a meeting with his Israeli counterpart. Benjamin Netanyahu is in London as thousands rally in Israel and here against a law that's been approved by his right-wing coalition. Critics say it's designed to shield him from his corruption trial. Rishi Sunak also called for a de-escalation of tensions in the West Bank. Well, outside Downing Street, demonstrators describe Netanyahu's controversial reforms as unacceptable.
We find it utterly unacceptable. Israel does not have checks and balances like the US. It does not have another chamber of parliament like Britain. It is just about one parliament.
This government basically works days and nights to make sure that women will not hold any powerful positions, just erasing women from public spaces.
The situation in Israel is that non-elected judges can make the law. It's unlike the United States, unlike UK, and all that the judicial reform wants to do is to restore the balance.
Security guards at Heathrow Airport will go ahead with strikes over the Easter holiday after talks over pay have failed. The airport says it has contingency plans in place to deal with the 10-day walkout by Unite members and keep it running as normal. Heathrow says they've offered a 10% pay increase to its workers. The BBC says it raised concerns about the recruitment of Richard Sharp before he was appointed as the corporation's chair. In 2020, the former BBC chair, Sir David Clementy, wrote to the government about its involvement in appointing his successor. He said even before the job had been advertised, the government was in discussions with the preferred candidate, including about salary. Mr Sharp is facing mounting pressure to resign after it emerged he helped former Prime Minister Boris Johnson secure an £800,000 loan. Ofsted says school inspections will continue. That's despite calls from teaching unions for them to be suspended. 3 unions say they should be paused while a review is carried out. It's after head teacher Ruth Perry took her own life in January whilst awaiting her school report. The Ofsted chief says that wouldn't be in the best interests of the children. Head teacher Sophie Greenaway says the mental health of staff should be a priority.
Ruth's death cannot be in vain. Ruth's death has got to lead to change. It can't just be that Ofsted say, oh, we'll have a think about the single word judgment, or that might be a good idea. That's brilliant. Yes, we would love conversations about that. That needs to happen. But that can't be the only thing. And sympathy for the family is not the only thing. They want change, and so do we.
And the Premier League has referred Everton to an independent commission to question reported losses over £370 million. Everton's loss during the 2021-22 season breaches the league's profit and financial sustainability rules, allowing clubs to lose a maximum of £105 million over a 3-year period or face sanctions. TV, online, DAB Plus radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's back to Michelle.
Thanks for that, Tatiana. Well, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Alex Dean, the political consultant and the man that can down a pint faster than anyone I've ever encountered. And I'm from Hull and I've encountered a lot of men and a lot of pints. So that is saying something. Anyway, alongside him, we've got Paul Embry, the writer, fireman and broadcaster. And also, Alex, you are a man of many talents, not just pint-supping times. You're a barrister as well?
Yeah, I haven't practiced for a long time.
Don't you worry about that. A skill is always a skill.
Okay.
And that skill will come in handy towards the end of the programme, because I want to ask you guys at home, have you seen the lunacy, that's what I'm calling it anyway, of all of these lefty lawyers that have come together now, basically, and said that they won't prosecute the climate activists? You what? I think that's pretty disgraceful, quite frankly, because where do you draw the line then? You know, what? You tell me, is there a line? Who decides it? Or should you just have to be a professional and represent anyone, whoever that is, whatever they've done? Your thoughts on all of that? Get in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk is the email, or you can tweet me at GBNews. Lots of you are in touch. Just seen my little handover with Patrick saying that was a good wolf whistle that I have got, asking me, can I repeat it on my programme? No, I cannot. If you've missed it, what can I say? You have really missed out. But Charlie's just tweeted me saying, Michelle, how do I teach my children to whistle in that way? All I can say to you is, it takes a long time. I spent hours and hours and hours when I was a child sitting in my bedroom practising whistling. There you go. What are you laughing at, Paul?
No, it sounds a really interesting childhood sitting in your bedroom practising whistling.
It will probably give you an insight into my life, really. You sit there on my own trying to whistle.
Nowhere near as rebellious as the media likes to make it.
Oh, don't you worry. That was not all I got up to in my youth. I wasn't just sitting alone whistling, I can tell you that.
You were reading Enid Blyton and practising
I
whistling
was?
in your bedroom.
Yes. How offensive that would be now, sitting and reading Enid Blyton as it once was. I think it'd terrorise the kids, wouldn't it, these days, apparently. Anyway, top story tonight. King Charles has been forced to cancel his fair state visit over in France due to the fact that a lot of France, quite frankly, is on fire at the moment due to protests, which originally started because people were furious by Macron raising the pension age there without a vote. He basically just took it upon himself to make people work an extra 2 years, and the French, being the French, are having absolutely none of it. Now, I'll ask you at home two things. Firstly, was the king right to cancel his visit? Do you think it sends the wrong message out to protesters, kind of endorsing their behaviour? And secondly, what do we think about pension ages? How often should they change, and to what level? Alex, pick either of those.
Well, on the King's visit, as I understand it, was the French who asked him not to because of the upheaval in their country. And that I well understand with someone, you've got a visiting dignitary, and if you feel you can't ensure or guarantee their safety, it's probably the right thing to do pragmatically. On the question you ask about pension age, we are living for a great deal longer than we were when the state pension ages in our countries, ours and the French, were set. And it's just self-evident that an ever-diminishing number of people working and being taxed ever more to pay into a pot for an ever larger cohort of retirees doesn't make sense. And I thank my maker that I live in a country where people don't, confronted with that self-evident reality, start setting stuff on fire. Now, you do have to raise the pension age, I think. There's a very small group of people that Paul will be keen to talk about who do kind of, very challenging manual labour of a kind that Paul used to do. And those people, they can't do the same job forever. That's true. But this discussion cannot be sidelined, given the plain economic realities of our pension cohort by focusing wholly on a group of people that in that world who could go on to manage, administer, teach, train and mentor others, or retrain and do another kind of job, rather than doing the challenging manual labour that seems to be, for some people, the whole of this discussion. We're living for decades longer, we should work a year or two more.
So currently the UK pension age is 66. It was planned to rise to 68 post 2044. There was talk of it coming forward. It's going to raise to 67 by the end of 2028. If you are a manual labourer, by the way, the kind Alex was just referring to, Alex is saying perhaps you might not be able to do manual labour up until that point, but you could reskill, retrain. How do you fancy them eggs then? You are 66 and now you've got to retrain to be, I don't know what, a teacher, a lecturer, anything. Your thoughts at home on that? Paul, what do you make?
Well, it's got to be driven by health and life expectancy issues rather than economic issues. That's what I would say. And it strikes me that often the people arguing for an increase in the pension age tend to make the argument it's all about the economics of it, we can't afford it. But we need to concentrate much more on issues of health and life expectancy. Look, I'm not so blind to the situation that I would say that even in a world where life expectancy was rising year on year, that there's never a case for raising the state pension age. Of course, there will come a time where there is a case for doing that. I don't deny that. But I think the world we're living in at the moment, particularly the sort of post-pandemic world and still dealing with the overhang from the pandemic, there's evidence to say, first of all, that life expectancy has stalled. I think in that scenario, we probably need to freeze any plans to raise the pension age. We need to look at the fact as well, linked into that there are very serious health concerns as a result of the pandemic in terms of, you know, the rise in the number of cancers, many of which went undetected because of the pandemic, people not going to the hospital and so on, heart disease on the rise and things like that.
A lot of people suddenly dropping down dead as well at the moment, aren't they? Would never get their pensions.
Maybe that as well. And the truth is that people's health tends to deteriorate around about their 60s. You know, people are generally, by and large, healthy. Not everybody, of course, but you can kind of do the things that you could normally do to a certain degree up until about your 50s. When you get into your 60s, I think the evidence shows, the medical data shows that's when your health starts to deteriorate. So the danger is that we increase the pension age, and then as a result of that, people can't draw a pension. So they either work when they're not fit to do so, or they just live in poverty. And I think that is a real danger. So of course, I'm not ideologically opposed to it, but it needs to be driven by the right concerns, not just by...
What's the retirement age in the fire service, by the way?
Well, it's increased. The government, we've had a big dispute about it over many years in the fire service. The government increased the normal pension age to 60. And this is a good point in terms of what Alex said, because when it comes to things like occupational pensions, something like that has to be built around the demands of the job. OK,
sure.
You can't have a situation where you say to a firefighter, look, it's OK for you to retire at 60 because someone working on a checkout at Sainsbury's or something retires at 60. If you have an occupational pension scheme, it has to be built around the specifics of the job. And clearly, you know, the spectacle of large numbers of firefighters working late into their 50s and until 60, going up ladders and rescuing people from burning buildings, I think is absurd, actually, and dangerous and wrong. And that is a crystal clear example of where the government has just decided to increase a pension age without actually thinking of what the consequences will be, both for the workers and the people that they're serving in this case.
That is, of course, correct, that you have to follow the occupation. But in most discussions in modern life, it's almost a truism to say people don't have the same job forever, right? The idea that you go into a job, you know, man and boy from apprentice until you retire, is remarkably unfashionable. Until you have this discussion about pensions, when it seems that every other person is an untrainable, unrefocusable person doing manual work who will effectively be left to go to the wall if we don't allow them to retire in their 40s. And we shouldn't allow this debate to be skewed in that way. The state, so you've got to look at the broad picture in society. The state pension was meant to be a few years out to pasture on the rest of us who are working because we recognise the contribution you've made, not the decades that it's come to be. And if you do want to have decades, then you should provide for for it yourself by contributing to your pension. It's not fair on others to expect them to subsidise your retirement for decades.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at my inbox, and this is dividing lots of opinion. There's a lot of response, by the way. If you're watching on telly, you will have been seeing really quite... they're eye-catching scenes, to put it mildly. In France, that's what was showing you. It literally, it was on fire. I suspect it might be again. And many people are saying, how lucky we are in this country that when people protest, they don't take it to those kind of levels. And I do have to say, I agree with you on that. Just to give you some facts, some figures about this then. The state pension bill is currently, it's expected to increase to £148 billion by 2028. Currently, it's about £110 billion, so 2022, 2023. If you look at where we are in terms of life expectancy and retirement ages, if I give you a few examples, life expectancy in France is 83. Their retirement age is now 64. This is the one that Macron's just pushed through because it was 62, and that was really low when you look at other places. So Italy, for example, theirs is 67 for a life expectancy of 84. United States has got a life expectancy apparently of 78. That's very low, isn't it? And United States, their pension age there is 66. So ours is actually quite ahead of a lot of those countries. I'm just looking down at about 66, I would say, is probably the average. When I think of people in their 60s that I know, I think they are still quite sprightly young people. I don't regard 60-odd now as pensioners. I know technically it is, but the ones that I know, I don't look at them and think, oh, blimey, you're a bit past it, pensioners. I don't feel like that.
No, and look, let's be completely honest about it. If you compare 60-somethings in the year 2023 with 60-somethings in the year 1953. I mean, you see old photos from the 50s of 60-year-olds, they look about 90. People are generally more healthy now as a result of better healthcare and better diet and, all
less
sorts
pollution,
etc. and all sorts of things. So, of course, there's an argument to say that as life expectancy increases, then the pension age should increase as well. But I do think as well that you can't disassociate this debate from the wider economic context, because the truth is that there are, whatever people's view about the pension, various disputes that are going on at the moment, I think people are really feeling the pinch, and especially people on the lower end of the lowest rungs of the economic ladder, finding it very, very difficult to make ends meet, feel that the economy isn't working for them, feel that the economy is unfair, feel that far too much wealth is concentrated in too few hands, don't see that ending anytime soon. Look at the economy throughout many Western countries as being fundamentally sick and imbalanced, and just kind of think, well, you're asking me to take another hit. You're asking me to keep my wages low. You want to restrain my wages during a cost of living crisis. And we're feeling the pinch. We're struggling to pay our mortgages, etc. And now you want me to take a hit on my pensions. You can't disassociate that from the wider
Final brief words.
Well, that's just like the discussion about life expectancy and coronavirus. Paul makes a short-term point about something that's a very long-term policy. We're making decisions about pension age that will apply in perhaps 15 years' time if implemented now. It's about the long-term trend. We are living for longer. Life expectancy is better and better. And we should think about that long-term for society rather than saying we won't do what's necessary because right now it seems inconvenient.
Yeah, lots of you guys getting in touch on this. Mick says, I've been a wholesale butcher all my life and I'm now riddled with arthritis. I wish I'd retrained as a civil servant. Which, by the way, if we're talking about reskilling in later life, should we have kind of lifelong skills credits? All people, all adults, like, for example, in Singapore, this is what they do there. All adults, you get access to a training budget, basically, which would allow you and help you to retrain whenever and wherever I suspect you wanted. Derek says, I work as a double glazing window fitter. My job is very hard, lifting heavy doors and windows. You tell me about your aches and your pains. You say, I'd love to see it. Pen pushers do my job in their 60s. Well, keep your thoughts coming in. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll have some more of your responses on that one. But we might have seen over the last few days the releases of tax information from Rishi Sunak and now by Keir Starmer. A couple of questions for you to ponder in the break. Number one, should politicians, really leaders of political parties, have to share with us their tax information like this? I've got strong opinions. I don't think they should, but would you agree or not? And when it comes to how much tax these guys are paying, should wealth, i.e. capital gains, be taxed at the same level as wages? Yes or no? I'll see you in 2.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewbs, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Alex Dean is a political consultant, and Paul Embry is a fireman, writer and broadcaster. Welcome back, everybody. Lots of you getting in touch. Ginny on Twitter says, I've only just discovered your show and I love it, Michelle. I listen on the radio, at work, in my kitchen, and I also listen to GB News before going to sleep. I wonder who you go to bed dreaming of then. Is it Dan Wootton or is it the guys after that? I guess it depends on your bedtime. Lots of you on Twitter getting in touch about the benefits and pensions. Phil says, this debate angers me, Michelle. Benefits have become pensions and pensions have become benefits. It sickens me, he says, that millions of people live their whole lives on benefits. There is no retirement age increase for them. Lots of you getting in touch about the kind of jobs that you do and the fact that you would struggle. Jan on Twitter says, Michelle, if I worked as a TV presenter, I could probably work up to my 80s as well. But given that I don't think I'll manage it past 67. Jan, I don't intend to stop in my 80s, thank you very much. I'll still be sat here whinging in my 90s, I think, as long as you guys will have me. Keep your thoughts coming in on the pension age. I've got to be honest, there's very little sympathy and support for retirement age increase. People saying that they don't want to work harder. Many people saying it's unfair. You've contributed towards your pension since you were 16 and you reckon that you're probably going to pop your clogs before you get your pension. You're asking me, how is that fair? Don't know that it is. Right, let's move on. Have you seen over the last couple of days we've been treated to the tax affairs of Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak. They've both released their tax affairs. And of course, as you would expect, it's prompted this huge debate off the back of it. People have been working out their effective tax rates. People are saying that Keir Starmer has effectively paid 32% as an effective tax rate, as opposed to Rishi Sunak, who paid what people are saying is essentially 22%. The difference is that one has largely employment-based income, the other one has largely capital gain-based income. The debate has then rumbled on, Paul, whether or not wealth, i.e. capital gains, should be taxed in the same way as wages. What do you think?
I think it probably should. I find it hard to see any justification why wealth, particularly, you know, what you might call unearned wealth, should not be taxed at the same rate as somebody's employment income, you know, for which they've had to go out and actually make an effort and do some work. And once upon a time, I have to say, I think the Tories believed in that as well. Nigel Lawson, when he was Chancellor in 1988, decided to equalise the rates between capital gains tax and income tax. And it just creates a level playing field, I think, in a way which is fair. And in a way as well, by the way, which could bring in billions to the exchequer.
Would you have any exemptions to this? Or would you just have all capital gains taxed the same as your income?
Well, I mean, if someone wants to make the case for why particular assets should be exempt, I'm willing to listen to it.
Well, let me ask you a simple question then. So your primary residence, your home, you buy a house, you live in it, and it appreciates in value. You've got on paper a capital gain. Should you be taxed on that?
I think, look, I mean, first of all, if you're talking about equalising it with normal tax rates, then obviously the less you make, the less you're going to pay in tax. And if
yeah,
you have,
I know that. But if your house goes up in value in your world, would you have your income tax applied to it?
In principle, I have no problem with tax being applied to that. But obviously, you factor in things like personal allowances and lower tax rates so that people at the lower end of the scale with smaller properties wouldn't be hit as hard as people with higher properties. But you know, I come back to the point that in principle, I don't see a strong case for saying that wealth that is derived from somebody's assets, which they're benefiting from in a big way sometimes, should not be taxed in the same way as employment.
Don't forget, though, everyone, that many people's assets have been purchased with post-taxed income. So people have perhaps gone to work, they've received their income tax on that money, then they've invested that post-tax money on their asset, and then they pay the capital gain on their asset. Should they really have double income tax? I think it's absolute lunacy. No offence, Paul. Alex?
Well, that was the point I was going to make. So
did I nick your point?
So I'd love to hear what Paul would say.
To what?
Why should people be taxed again?
No, look, I think there's an argument to say that if you can prove that people have paid an amount in tax already, that might be the equivalent to what it is that they're expected to pay.
People have paid tax on almost everything.
And that's up for debate. That's up for debate. I'm not suggesting that people should necessarily be double taxed. There could be workarounds to make it to make people exempt where there's a legitimate case for it being so.
So the interesting distinction that you were making was between earned wealth and unearned wealth. Michelle was talking about what you would call, I think, earned wealth. So someone's gone out, so they've worked, they've paid their income tax on something, they've gone out and bought, let's say, an asset, they've probably paid VAT or something, or stamp duty, whatever it is, on the asset they've bought. So they've paid tax twice on it already. You, presumably, given your position as it evolves in front of us, wouldn't want people to be taxed a third time on that. So what do you call unearned wealth?
Well, I think, hold on a second. Just on that argument, I mean, where does that argument stop? Because you could say, for example, that when you go out and do the weekly shop, you know, you get the money, obviously, from the money that you've earned, and you're going to be paying VAT on certain products. So there are, of course, examples.
Yeah, we're already double taxed like that. You're arguing for triple tax, right. And I'm asking where that would stop.
OK, so what I'm saying is, in principle, what's being suggested is nothing necessarily out of the ordinary as a basic principle that people may end up paying tax on something that they have paid for from a salary which they have already been taxed on.
It is different.
That's nothing out of the ordinary.
It is different because it's not instead of that double taxation, it's as well as that. So what you're arguing for is triple taxation. But the distinction you were making between earned wealth and unearned wealth wasn't something that Michelle or I volunteered, you did. So what do you mean by unearned wealth?
Well, I think very clearly that there's a difference between money that you earn through your income, through going out to work, and money that you acquire one way or another as a result of assets. Now, we can sit here and talk about a million different ways that you do that, but essentially we're talking about money that isn't derived from an employment income.
But let's be clear. Let's be clear. When one invests, more often than not, their post-taxed money into an asset, you take a risk. And when you do this, I don't know, you might buy shares, you might buy a house, whatever, who cares, whatever the asset is irrelevant. So I take a risk with this. It may go up, it may go down. So first and foremost, that risk should be rewarded, because when I go to work and I do a time-money exchange, there is no risk. I'm giving you my time, you're giving me some dosh, off we go. When I stick my post-tax money into an asset, I take this risk, and that risk may or may not pay off. What happens if it doesn't pay off and I make a loss on my asset?
The state doesn't make good, does it?
But
do I get a credit?
OK, but the alternative is that people... You know, people can be multi-millionaires, OK, or billionaires in some cases, and derive most of their wealth.
And there it is. It's jealousy. That's the point. It's not actually. It's about jealousy.
It's not about jealousy. It's about fairness. Can be billionaires in some cases, and their wealth is derived not through necessarily working hard, but as a result of happening to own assets, which may have been passed to them in some cases. But the principle that you've just set out there, Michelle, is that they shouldn't even pay any tax at all.
Michelle, here it is. Of course they pay. Of course they pay tax.
A basic capital gains tax
on
that,
you shouldn't pay gains. You shouldn't pay capital gains on your losses.
And there, Michelle, there it is. In the end, that's what it's about. We talked before the break about one of the great things about this country, which is when the government discusses a policy we don't like, we don't go around setting buildings on fire, generally. On the other hand, here's something that's not great about our country. Because in America, if someone has made good, someone's made millions or billions, generally speaking, the attitude is, well done on that person. I'd like to be that successful if I apply myself. In this country, it tends to be, why have they got something I haven't got? They shouldn't have it. And we'll call it fairness because we want to drag them down. I think that's a shame. And in the end, we've got to decide if we want high earners in this country or not. I do, but however much you must dress it up, Paul, you don't.
It's not about jealousy, it's about fairness. And you can't just dismiss it and say, oh, because you want to tax wealthy people in order that people at the lower end of the scale can have a better life, that we can fund our public services, that's jealousy. It's not. It's about having a healthy economy and a fair economy and a compassionate society. You shouldn't.
That's what you say now. It was the gleam in your eye. It was the gleam in your eye when you mentioned billionaires, millionaires and billionaires.
The logical consequence of what you're arguing, Alex, is that you would not have capital gains tax at all.
No. The settlement.
So you are in favour of double taxing?
The settlement we've got at the moment is to a degree, right?
Right. So you're agreeing with me then?
The settlement we have at the moment is one. It's a bit like the difference between stamp duty in '97 being 0.5% on all properties and being where it is now, eye-watering on family homes. If you've already been taxed once, the principle should be that if you're going to be taxed again, it should be at a lower rate. Yes. And you don't believe that. That's the debate that we're having, Paul, unless you hadn't noticed. And I suppose the real thing about this is...
the logical consequence of your argument is that you should get rid of capital gains tax completely.
No,
Why not?
Because I look at a situation that we have at the moment, and given their finances have been exposed for all to see on this channel today and elsewhere, I look at a situation where people say, isn't it terrible that Rishi Sunak, our Prime Minister, has paid a lower rate, effectively, of tax on the money he's received this year than Keir Starmer has? And the answer to that is, who actually paid more tax, right? Who paid more tax as a figure? And it's obviously Rishi Sunak. And that's the point. You'd rather people weren't wealthy at all. It's about your jealousy, Paul.
Sunak's wealth.
There you go.
Puts Keir Starmer's wealth in the shade.
It's about your jealousy.
I think even you could argue that Rishi Sunak works harder than Keir Starmer.
And so what? So what, Paul?
Good luck to him.
No, you don't mean. But you don't mean good luck to him, Paul.
Pay your share and don't complain when you have to pay a little bit more.
You don't mean good luck to him at all.
Who earned a lot less.
You mean you don't like people to have wealth. That's what you mean.
See, well, I'm going to let you guys make your mind up at home. I've got to say, I always find it fascinating that everyone who wants everyone else to pay more tax, when you apply it inward, i.e. to perhaps your primary residence, then people go, oh, no, I don't mean that. I mean them. They should pay more tax. Them. The wealthy, them. I do. I always think it's politics of envy. You will tell me, I am sure. If you agree with us or not, who you agree with, your thoughts, get them coming in to me. gbviews@gbnews.uk is how you reach me. You can tweet me at gbnews. When I come back from my break, I want to ask you about Ofsted inspections in schools. Are they inhumane, I ask, after a head teacher very sadly took her own life? Is it time to scrap the inspections? And after that, I also want to get into the ridiculousness of lawyers saying that they won't prosecute climate activists. You what? Don't go anywhere. I'll see you in 2.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in My Big Opinion, 3 years on from the first lockdown, the moment the free world lost its mind. In my take at 10, Tesco have reduced the value of club card points. So much for every little helps. Rishi Sunak's Brexit breakthrough has gone into law. Can we now move on? I'll ask Brexiteer David C. Bannerman. A torrid week for Boris Johnson. Reaction from socialite Lady Victoria Hervey. And as trans women are banned from athletics competition, we'll speak to boxing promoter Kelly Maloney. We're live at 8.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight alongside me, Alex Dean, the political consultant, and Paul Embury, fireman, writer and broadcaster. Goodness gracious me, you guys. That last debate about income tax and capital gains, that has really got you guys talking. And I've got to say, you really are divided. Gillian says, Paul says, tax has to be fair, but since when is life ever been fair? Does that mean that life shouldn't be fair just because it already isn't? I don't know. John says, wealth and greed usually go hand in hand together. Your segment always, your tax segment has made me smile, says David. Most people would try and pay as little tax as possible. I agree with you. One of my viewers here says that I'm a working class Geordie, but I agree with the barrister. That's you. Many people are saying it's not jealousy. What Paul is talking about is fairness, and he's absolutely right. God, you really are divided. Really are. Some people saying it is jealousy. Some people saying you're absolutely spot on. It is all fairness. One person, Steve from Hull, says, One man's extreme wealth is another man's extreme poverty. He's asking, how is that fair? Dale says, Michelle, if government spent our tax wisely, then maybe there wouldn't be any need for a wealth tax grab after all. I think you raise a very good point. Wow, you really are getting in touch. You're divided, let's just say that. I'd say 50% of you agree with Alex, 50% of you agree with Paul. Let's talk schools, shall we? The regulator Ofsted is under pressure to suspend their investigations. This, of course, follows the story of the awful, tragic suicide of the head teacher, Ruth Perry, back in January when she waited for an Ofsted assessment. Let's cut to the chase on this one. Many people saying the inspection should be paused, other people saying they should be scrapped. Where do you stand, Alex?
Both my parents are teachers. I respect the profession enormously. What's happened is tragic. It's very, very sad for the community concerned, for the family of the individual concerned. But and so I mean, you know, you'd have to have a heart of stone not to think that. But these individual outcomes don't necessarily mean that you need to discard a whole system. After all, I have to say it, we put pressure on our children with examinations because that's part of life. We put, GCSEs and A-levels are high pressure and they come with strains, and those strains have outcomes on children from time to time, and including quite profound ones. And the right answer to those strains and pressures is to provide more support and help for those who are struggling, not to suspend the examination and not to stop testing. After all, in the end, the Ofsted inspections, the Ofsted system, is to ensure a decent quality of teaching and a decent, some minimum requirements in schools. It's right that those things are assessed for children and for their parents. So I'm afraid I don't think we should suspend Ofsted, because no matter how undeniably tragic an individual example of something going wrong may be, in just the same way that we don't say get rid of GCSEs or A-levels because a young person finds the system incredibly hard.
Paul?
I've got real concerns over Ofsted and over the system of inspections. First of all, I think it only really shows a snapshot when you get inspectors turn up for a day or two. And, you know, I know schools get, I think, a day's notice, 24 hours notice that they're coming in. And Billy Connolly always used to say that whenever the Queen was going anywhere, there would always be someone painting in front
Smell
of
of fresh paint, yeah.
She thought the world smelled of fresh paint. And it strikes me that Ofsted and schools, that relationship is a little bit like that as well. Where teachers just put everything in place to make sure that everything looks, you know, particularly special for the Ofsted inspectors. So it's only really a snapshot, and I don't know if it's an accurate snapshot that the inspectors get. But I do sense that it does bring with it a real kind of culture of fear, and we've seen that play out in this. It's a tragic case. This poor woman who was dedicated to the profession of teaching and dedicated to her students. Felt the need to take her own life in this way. And I do think that actually when you look at the grading system of Ofsted, where you have, you know, outstanding, good, satisfactory and inadequate, seems to me to be a very, very simplistic way of approaching an inspection in a school, because there are all sorts of dynamics going on in a school at any one time. Schools do good things, they do not so good things, and to almost define an entire school simply with one word, and to say inadequate, your school is inadequate, no matter some of the good things that may be taking place.
Isn't it simplistic
I think it's not the way necessary to do it. I believe in inspections, don't misunderstand me. I believe in the principle of inspections, but perhaps a different type of system, and one that where it's written up, there's a narrative report rather than essentially everyone concentrating on.
If I may say, you put that very reasonably, but in the end, that desire not to have a kind of grade, if you like, then why would you have first 2-1, 2-2 or third? Why would you let someone have an A-level that's an A or a B or a C or a D? In the end, these institutions are awarding people grades, and they come with a one-letter or one-word evaluation.
Because I think the difference is, Alex, if you do a 3-year degree in fine art, for example, then you're immersed in that particular subject.
Sure, but my exams don't show the true totality of me, so you should come with a narrative rather than a grade.
No, hold on. I think that if you're doing a 3-year degree in fine art, then it's reasonable to assume that actually that is going to be a fair reflection of what you're doing, because it's a single dedicated thing that you do. With schools, there's a whole raft of things going on in schools. It's not just about one issue.
Lots of you have strong opinions on this. Nigel says, who inspects the inspectors? They seem to be running an unregulated terror regime. Cool, blimey, that's a bit extreme. I'm not sure I agree with that. It's time for a revolution, says Cynthia. Enough is enough. Our daughter-in-law nearly has a breakdown when Ofsted is going to visit her school. Why? Doesn't she think that she runs a good school? Because surely you only worry if you're not confident in the job that you're doing. Or am I missing something? I'm sure you'll tell me if you are. Lots of you agreeing with Ofsted. Think that the checks absolutely should continue. Keep your thoughts coming in. When I come back, I want to get into this story, over a pint, of course, about why 120 lawyers have signed a so-called declaration of conscience, saying that they won't prosecute peaceful climate activists. You what? Slippery slope this if you ask me. Give me your thoughts. I'll see you in 2.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry. This is Dewbs & Co, and I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, with a beer in hand, Alex Dean, Paul Embry. I was just about to say, look at the head on that one, but I don't know where it's gone down. Right. Cheers, everyone. Cheers. I don't drink pints.
Oh, yeah, not on camera.
Not on camera, everyone. I'm a lady. This is not champagne, it is Prosecco. We're not the BBC. We don't splash cast. We're sensible with our funds. Anyway, cheers. Happy Friday to everyone.
Cheers.
Stephen says, he's been in touch, one of my viewers. Stephen says, the whole lot of them should be struck off. This country is lost. Shall I tell you who he's talking about? Barristers. Do you know why? Because, get this, 120 lawyers have gone basically against the rules of the bar. What they've done, They've signed a so-called declaration of conscience. What it means basically is that they're saying that if someone is a peaceful climate activist, they won't prosecute them, and they're also saying they will not act for fossil fuel interests. Now, you are a barrister. I know you said earlier you're non-practicing, but you've still got that skill and talent. What do you make to this? He's gone.
He's gone again.
Excuse me, if you're listening and not watching, you don't even know what's going on.
He did that.
He's finished his pine already.
You asked me a serious question, we haven't got much time. I'm so surprised by this lack of understanding about the profession's requirements that I went and checked the Bar Council guidelines are still in force, and they are. They say that the cab rank rule, which is the metaphor with the cab, hackney cab pulling up by the rank, is still in force and still good practice. That is to say, if you're qualified to do the work, and if you're instructed to do the work, then you do the work, unless it's offered for something that's not an adequate fee. Part of the point of that is to ensure that people get adequate representation on both sides in a case, and part of it is to ensure that it's clear there's no moral choice being made by counsel in who their client may be. Without that, if we go down this road and if we say that you can pick and choose your clients, then very quickly those accused of terrorism, those accused of murder, those accused of rape will not, including, by the way, those who are innocent and are falsely accused, will find that they can't get good representation or any representation. As soon as you start doing that, you get trial by barrister rather than trial by jury. And believe me, nobody wants that. And Michelle, when things look worst for you, that's when you need help the most. When the evidence looks damning, that's when you need help the most from your counsel, not having them demonstrate their moral virtue by saying they won't take your case.
Paul Embry?
Yeah, there's nothing there that I could disagree with. I think it would set a very, very dangerous precedent. I think it would potentially deny some people access to justice. I think some people might find themselves discriminated against when it came to getting representation when they needed it. And quite simply, it is for judges and juries to decide rights and wrongs.
Spot on.
And it is for barristers to put the case of the people that they are representing. And it seems to me for a barrister to say, actually, I'm also going to put myself in the shoes of the judge and the jury, is a complete violation of the code, whatever the code is that barristers work to.
Correct, and your code of conduct, that is absolutely correct. And of course, the only thing to add is that it's all theory anyway, because these 120 practitioners, none of them actually prosecute crime anyway. It's just complete virtue signalling. They're about as relevant to this as I am, and I haven't practiced for 12 years.
I haven't found a single viewer or listener that currently agrees. Do you exist? Who are these people that actually think that this is a good idea? Phil says, get Alex to go on Talking Pints with Nigel. You've done it, haven't you?
I did.
Yeah,
I was the only person who's had 2 pints.
Oh, there you go. Talking Pints plural is our old Alex Dean there. Pretty much nobody agrees with that. You're really not happy that people are going to essentially put their own political opinions and beliefs above their professional, rules and all the rest of it. Carol, you made a really good point about an earlier debate, and I just want to find it because I think it's interesting. You said, Karen, it's all right raising the pension age, but why don't you try to find an employer who wants you when you're older? Age discrimination, many saying, are alive and well. You're all saying as well, you're all saying that these lawyers are out of order. You're saying they won't prosecute climate activists, but they will prosecute you and try and get you locked up for 2 years. For wolf whistling, many of you asking, will you just do your wolf whistle again for anyone that's just joined the show? In my ear, they say, yes, please. OK, I will. George has asked me on Twitter. Here you go, then, everyone. One last time for the record. I'm not doing it for anyone in particular, so don't take me to HR, please. You ready? There you go. Yeah. On that note, thank you very much, Alex and Paul. Everyone, have a fantastic weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.
Good evening and welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office with me, Annie Shuttleworth. Now through Saturday, it will stay showery with some sunshine around, but then into Sunday, we see a bit of a shift as our winds turn to more of a northerly. But for now, through the rest of Friday, we've still got this area of low pressure that's going to be bringing a rather unsettled evening and a westerly breeze, so still quite blustery all the way through Friday night. So some quite heavy showers will affect parts of Northern Ireland, southern Scotland